Let's learn about outposts. An outpost is a square in your opponent's camp which you control with a pawn and which your opponent cannot attack with a pawn. Move your knight to d5 in order to occupy the outpost. Minor pieces on outposts can be a thorn in your opponent's side. Since none of my pieces can directly attack your knight, my position suddenly became a minefield. My position looks like Swiss cheese. Your knights have perfect outposts around my camp. Start by moving your knight to d6. Now my bishop is stuck on defensive duty guarding my pawn. My rook is now on defensive duty watching the pawn. Continue by moving your knight to f4. Now I am afraid of moving anything. Maybe I can safely move this pawn. Let's see what happens when you jump to g6 with your knight. Oops! Now my queen and rook are forked. When you are occupying useful outposts, your opponent will be restricted in their options and danger is always just around the corner. I've saved my queen, but I can't save my rook. Capture my rook with your knight. Good. Whenever you are occupying outposts, your opponent's position will feel like a minefield and danger is always around the corner. I've just placed my knight on d4. However, it is not an outpost since you can use an adjacent pawn to kick it out. Kick my knight out of d4 by playing your pawn to c3. I must move the knight out of harm's way. Back to where it came from. The best way to prevent your opponents from occupying outposts is to not create them in your camp. Keep your pawns flexible so you may kick pieces away. My knight is on the d4 outpost. One of the ways of combating outposts is to simply capture the piece on the outpost. Use your knight and capture my knight on d4. My pawn must capture and occupy d4. My pawn is wedged in the center instead of my knight, which is better for you. Move your knight to d5. It's my turn to give your knight the boot. Since your knight is in danger, it would make sense to exchange the knights. I'll recapture with my queen. Good. You can combat pieces on outposts by simply capturing them. Before occupying an outpost, often you have to remove the defenders. Begin by capturing my knight on f6. Now there is one less bodyguard watching the d5 outpost. Continue by moving your bishop to d5. I can't avoid the exchange of bishops. Capture my bishop and claim your prize position. I dub your eight-legged monster Sir Octopus. If you cannot use a knight, a bishop is the second best piece to stand on an outpost. Your goal is to maneuver your bishop to e5. Can you find the first move? Correct. Your bishop is heading towards the e5 outpost. Now what should you play? Great. Your bishop is almost to his destination. Now what should you play? That was a long journey. Now your bishop dominates the dark squares from a beautiful outpost. The rook and queen tend to be poor occupants of outposts in the middle game. They often become targets of attack rather than being a useful tenant. Attack my queen on the e4 outpost. Oh dear, my queen has few options for her retreat. She can run, but she can't hide. Use your pawn to continue to attack my queen. All this retreating. Maybe I'll capture something instead. Recapture my bishop with your queen. Drat, I lost a bishop for a pawn. It's necessary to be cautious when putting a queen or rook on an outpost. Occasionally, your pieces might have to go on a long trek to occupy an outpost. Begin the journey by playing your knight to a3. All I can do is watch your knight's journey to d5. Lucky me, I get a front row seat. Continue by moving your knight to c2. Nothing I can do or say. Continue by moving your knight to b4. Almost to El Dorado. Finish the knight's journey. Nicely done. Your knight is dominating the board while my bishop is a mere spectator. A rook can be well placed on an outpost when there are no more minor pieces to attack it. Move your rook to d6. Your rook is a powerful resource, and if I capture it, you can recapture with your pawn on e5, creating a protected passed pawn. Your protected passed pawn on d6 will ensure that you retain a long-term advantage. If you want to occupy an outpost with a piece, then you must have an excess of pieces available to jump into the outpost. Begin by moving your e3 knight to d5. I'm not going to let you have an outpost so easily. Now I've exchanged one of my defenders of the outpost. Continue by capturing my bishop with your knight. I'm still not going to let you have that outpost. Now none of my pieces are watching the d5 outpost. Capture my knight with your bishop. The outpost is yours. Now let's practice what we've learned. Do you see an outpost you can occupy with your knight? Good. Your knight is sitting beautifully on the d5 outpost. What is the quickest way to maneuver your bishop to the e5 outpost? Good. Your bishop is heading towards the e5 outpost. What is the next move you should make with your bishop? Correct? Almost there. Now where should your bishop move to occupy the e5 outpost? Well done. Now your bishop is on an active square and ready for the tough battle ahead. Can you maneuver your knight to the f6 outpost? Excellent decision. Your knight is on its way to the f6 outpost. What should you play now? Well done. Now my pawns will be living in fear for the remainder of the game. Your knight would like to jump to d5. However, d5 is guarded by my pawn. Do you see a way to force my pawn to move? That's right. My pawn will have to move out of the way and your knight can soon occupy the d5 outpost. It's a good idea to recapture the pawn before occupying the outpost. Capture the pawn on b5 with your rook. You got me. d5 is yours for the taking. What knight move should you play now? Great. You created an outpost by distracting my pawn. My knight on f6 prevents your knight from occupying the outpost on d5. Do you see a way to solve this problem? After this move, my knight can capture your knight and you'll lose the outpost. Be sure to capture my knight first before occupying this square. My knight on f6 prevents your knight from occupying the outpost on d5. Do you see a way to solve this problem? Good. Now none of my pieces are guarding your d5 outpost. Now you can safely move your knight to d5. Well played. Remember this idea. Sometimes you must capture the pieces defending an outpost before occupying it. I have just placed my knight onto d4, an excellent square for my knight. What are you going to do about it? Simple and to the point. No outpost for me. I have just moved my rook to e8, expecting you to exchange rooks. But you have another option. Do you see it? Yes, by placing your rook on this outpost, you attack two weak pawns on d6 and f6 and force me to capture. Whichever way you capture back, you will emerge with a protected passed pawn on the e6 square and a completely winning position. Nicely played. Your protected passed pawn on e6 will prove to be advantageous for you in the long term. Which move places your knight on an outpost? You've earned your outpost, but I see a free rook sleeping in the corner. Should I take it? Why not? Unfortunately for me, you have a beautiful move to play, forking my king and queen. Oops! Now my king and queen are forked. My queen. Well done. On an outpost, your knight turned out to be worth more than a rook. My knight is aggressively placed on d4, but is this an outpost? Can you dislodge my knight? Well done. The central square d4 is not an outpost since your pawn can attack this square. 3 of your pieces are ready to jump into the d5 outpost. Which piece should you use? Be careful. My pawn is threatening your knight. 3 of your pieces are ready to jump into the d5 outpost. Which piece should you use? That's the one. My pawn was attacking your knight, and now your knight is headed for greener pastures. What is the best move in this position? You got it. Now your knight will be a long-term thorn in my side. There are many good squares for your pieces, but only one outpost. That's it. This is a powerful outpost for your knight. Now it is attacking my queen and bishop. Students who don't know about outposts would have no idea what to play in this position. You have learned well. Now I ought to try to attack and capture your knight. Now you have a wonderfully tricky move to play. That works, but you're better off leaving your knight on the outpost. Now you have a wonderfully tricky move to play. Forking my king and rook. I couldn't take your knight because it was defended by your other knight. Now you can capture my rook on a8. Well done. I left your pieces aggressively placed and did not manage to kick them out in time. You're in check. What's the best way to get out of it? Very good. You took my most threatening piece off the board. I've recaptured your knight. What should you play now? Well done. My knight was aggressively placed on the f3 outpost, and you removed it by capturing it with your knight. Practice makes perfect. This is not necessarily a bad move. However, the e5 square is not an outpost and my knight can simply capture your knight. Practice makes perfect. Perfect for you. Now my pieces are frozen and unable to safely land on dark squares. Your king is in check and my knight is happy. Are you happy? Now I'm unhappy. If I do not want to lose material, I'm obliged to recapture. Now you are faced with an important decision. Should you simply exchange rooks, or is there another idea here? Excellent. By using your rook to occupy this outpost on the open file, you are attacking my weak pawn on c6 and relegating my pieces to passivity. I have an outpost, and you have an outpost, but only one of us can keep it. Well done. The e4 square is not an outpost since one of your pawns could kick my knight away. See an outpost. Take an outpost. Good. Your knight is now perfectly placed on the e5 outpost. We are close to the end. I hope you're seeing outposts everywhere now. Correct. Now my king cannot castle and is stuck in the center. For your final challenge, you will need to apply all of the skills you have learned. This is the correct square for this piece, but you cannot rush to occupy it. I can simply remove the knight using either my knight or my bishop. First, you should find a way to attack and remove my knight. For your final challenge, You will need to apply all of the skills you have learned. Well played. The battle for the D5 outpost begins. Now what should you play? Of course I recapture, Hummer. How do you remove the last guard on D5? Correct again. My minor pieces will soon be unable to prevent your knight from entering the outpost. Now what should you play? Truly well done. If I could give you a pat on the back, I would. Congratulations, you've mastered the concept of the outpost. When you see one in a game, think of our lesson and you'll know what to do.